10-year-old Oliver lived with his grandmother Eleanor in a small cottage at the edge of a quiet town. The cottage was old and worn, with creaking wooden floors and windows that didn't close properly. Money was always tight. Eleanor worked as a cleaner at the local school, and Oliver helped her by doing small jobs around the neighborhood. He would mow lawns, rake leaves, and help elderly people carry their groceries. For every job he did, he earned a little money. Oliver had been saving his money for 3 months. He kept every coin and every dollar bill in an old tin box hidden under his bed. He had counted it many times. $47. That was a lot of money for a 10-year-old boy. He had a plan for it, though he had not told anyone what it was. He wanted to buy a bicycle. He wanted it so badly that sometimes he dreamed about riding it through the town, feeling the wind on his face. One cool autumn afternoon, Oliver decided to explore the forest behind his grandmother's house. He had walked those paths many times before, but that day he decided to go deeper than usual. The trees grew taller and thicker. The sunlight barely reached the ground. Birds sang above him, and sometimes he heard small animals moving through the bushes. He walked for a long time, enjoying the peace and quiet of the forest. As he walked, he heard a sound. It was not a normal forest sound. It was a low cry, almost like a moan, but deeper and sadder. Oliver stopped and listened. The sound came again, pulling him toward it like an invisible rope. He followed the sound, pushing through thick branches and stepping over fallen logs. Then he saw it. Behind a tall waterfall that poured into a small pool, there was a cave. And in that cave, Oliver saw something that made his heart stop. Dragons. Real dragons. There were 3 of them. The mother was lying on her side, her scales dull and faded. She was so thin that Oliver could see the shape of her bones beneath her skin. The father dragon sat beside her, and his left wing was bent at a strange angle, clearly broken. The young dragon, no bigger than a large dog, huddled behind them, shaking with cold and fear. Oliver stood frozen. He had read stories about dragons. He had seen pictures in books and movies. But seeing them in real life was different. These dragons were real. They were suffering. And they were right here, just behind his grandmother's house, hidden from the world. The mother dragon's eyes opened slowly. They were bright gold, and they looked directly at Oliver. The boy did not feel afraid. Instead, he felt something else, something warm in his chest. He felt sadness. He felt the pain of these beautiful creatures who were alone and dying. Eleanor had told him many times that dragons were dangerous. She said they were monsters that would hurt him. But Oliver looked at them and saw something different. He saw a mother protecting her family. He saw a father trying to be strong despite his injury. He saw a baby dragon too young to understand why it was suffering. Oliver made a decision in that moment. He decided to help them. He ran back to the cottage. Eleanor was not home yet. She was still at work. Oliver went to his room and pulled out the tin box from under his bed. He looked at all the money inside. $47. His bicycle money. His dream money. He took the box and went to the town. He went to the grocery store and bought fish, chicken, rice, and fresh vegetables. He bought medicine from the pharmacy, telling the owner it was for his grandmother's arthritis. The owner did not ask many questions. He spent $35 on food and medicine alone. Then Oliver went to the hardware store and bought old blankets that were being sold cheaply. He spent $5 on those. He went to the animal shelter and asked if they had any special vitamin supplements. They gave him some for free when he explained he was helping animals in need. By the time Oliver was done, he had spent almost every penny. He had only $2 left in his pocket. He gathered everything in bags and began carrying them back to the forest. It took him many trips. Back and forth. Back and forth. His legs grew tired, but he kept going. He kept thinking about the baby dragon shaking with cold. When he reached the waterfall cave, the dragons were waiting. He spread the food on flat rocks inside the cave. The mother dragon lifted her head slowly and sniffed the air. Then she began to eat. The father dragon ate too, carefully, as if his body was too weak to handle too much food at once. The baby dragon came out from behind them and looked at Oliver with curious eyes. Oliver spent the next few hours building a shelter from branches and leaves at the entrance of the cave. He wanted to protect them from the cold wind and rain. He made a bed from the blankets and watched as the baby dragon curled up and fell asleep, finally warm and safe. As the sun began to set and the sky turned orange and purple, the mother dragon did something that Oliver would never forget. She stood up, slowly and painfully, and walked toward him. Her great head came down low and she breathed warm air across his face. Her golden eyes looked into his, and Oliver felt something pass between them. It was not words. It was not sound. It was something deeper. It was a connection. It was gratitude. It was trust. In that moment everything changed. The boy who had wanted a bicycle found something much more valuable. He found purpose. He found friendship. He found magic. Eleanor came home that evening and found Oliver sitting on the porch, covered in dirt and leaves, with a smile on his face bigger than she had ever seen before. She did not ask him where he had been or why he looked so happy. She simply held him close and whispered a prayer of thanks for raising such a kind and brave boy. Oliver woke up early the next morning, excited to return to the forest and see the dragons again. He had barely slept, thinking about Rosa and Leo and little Ember. He was planning to collect more food for them when his grandmother called him to breakfast. Eleanor had made toast and eggs. They sat together at the small kitchen table and she looked at Oliver carefully. She seemed to know something had changed in him, but she did not ask questions. Oliver ate quickly, thinking only about getting back to the forest. After breakfast, he helped his grandmother with some chores around the cottage. He swept the kitchen floor and helped her water the plants. The morning was cool and bright. The sun came through the windows and made everything look peaceful and safe. Oliver did not know that this would be one of the last peaceful mornings he would ever know. Around noon, Eleanor needed to go to the town to buy groceries. She asked Oliver if he wanted to come with her. He said no. He wanted to stay home and read. Eleanor kissed the top of his head and told him to lock the door and not let anyone inside. She said she would be back in a few hours. Oliver promised to be careful. The moment Eleanor left, Oliver grabbed a backpack and filled it with more food he had saved from the kitchen. He was heading toward the door when he heard it. A sound unlike anything he had ever heard before. It was a low rumbling sound, but it came from the sky. Oliver ran outside and looked up. At first he thought it was thunder. But then he saw them. Ships. Massive ships descending through the clouds. They were not like any airplane Oliver had ever seen. They were huge and strange, shaped like nothing that made sense. They had sharp angles and smooth curves all at once. They gleamed with a silver-blue color that seemed to shift and change as they moved. There were lights underneath them, bright and blinding. The sound they made was terrible and wrong, like metal screaming against metal. Oliver's mouth fell open. He stood in the yard of his grandmother's cottage and watched as 3 massive ships lowered themselves toward the town. He felt very small and very afraid. Then the ships stopped moving. They hung in the air above the town like giant predators. Nothing happened for a moment. Oliver waited, his heart pounding in his chest. He wanted to run inside and hide. He wanted to call his grandmother. But he was frozen watching the sky. Then the ships opened. Doors opened in their sides and something came out. Not people. Something else. The creatures were tall and thin, with bodies that looked like they were made of crystal or glass. They did not have faces like people did. Instead, they had smooth surfaces with lines running through them like cracks in ice. Their eyes glowed with a cold blue light. They moved in a way that was not natural. They moved like machines, each movement exact and precise. There was no life in their movements. There was no emotion. There was only purpose. These were the Vex. But Oliver did not know their name yet. The creatures descended from the ships on platforms of light. Dozens of them. Then hundreds. They surrounded the town in a perfect circle, moving with military precision. From where Oliver stood, he could see them spreading out through the streets. He heard sirens. He heard people shouting. He heard the sound of vehicles and chaos. Oliver ran back inside the cottage and locked the door. He looked out the window and saw military trucks racing toward the town center. Soldiers in uniforms jumped out and aimed their weapons at the creatures. But nothing happened. The weapons did not fire. The soldiers seemed confused and afraid. Then Oliver saw something that made his blood run cold. Energy barriers began to appear around the town. They were like walls made of light, blue and glowing, stretching high into the sky. The barriers surrounded everything, trapping people inside like insects in a jar. Oliver heard gunfire. He heard explosions. He heard people screaming. He pressed himself against the wall of his cottage, trying to stay hidden, trying to stay safe. He looked at the phone on the table. He wanted to call his grandmother. But what could she do? What could anyone do? The fighting lasted for about 30 minutes. It was not really a fight. The soldiers tried their best, but their weapons did not work against the aliens. The creatures from the ships moved through the town with perfect coordination, and wherever they went, the soldiers fell back. Some soldiers were captured. Some were hurt. But the Vex did not seem interested in killing everyone. They just wanted control. Soon the town was silent. The screaming stopped. The shooting stopped. Only the sound of the alien machines and the humming of the energy barriers remained. Oliver watched from his window as soldiers in strange suits began going house to house. He knew they would come here eventually. He knew his grandmother would not be home. She was probably trapped in the town somewhere, maybe behind one of those terrible barriers. He had to do something. He had to find her. But he had no idea what to do or how to do it. He was just a 10-year-old boy. The aliens had weapons and ships and technology he did not understand. Then Oliver remembered the dragons. The dragons hidden in the forest behind his house. Rosa and Leo and little Ember. They were magic. They were powerful. They had been waiting in the forest, hidden from a world that had forgotten about them. Maybe they could help. Maybe they would help. Oliver grabbed his backpack and moved toward the back door. Outside, he could see the energy barriers glowing in the distance. Soldiers in alien suits were getting closer to his grandmother's cottage. Soon they would reach him. Oliver opened the back door quietly and ran toward the forest. He ran as fast as his legs could carry him, pushing through the bushes and trees. He ran toward the waterfall. He ran toward the dragons. He ran toward hope. Behind him, the cottage door burst open. The Vex had arrived. Oliver ran through the forest as fast as his young legs could carry him. Branches whipped at his face, leaving small scratches. His lungs burned with effort. Behind him, he could hear the sound of the alien machines moving through the trees, destroying everything in their path. The energy barriers hummed in the distance. The world was ending and he was running toward the only hope he had left. He burst through the clearing where the waterfall was. His clothes were torn and dirty. His face was red from running. His breath came in short gasps. The cave behind the waterfall was dark and quiet, just as it had been the day before when he found the dragons. Oliver ran into the cave and collapsed on his knees. He was crying now, tears running down his dusty face. His hands were shaking. He looked around the darkness, searching for the dragons, but he could not see them clearly. Then a golden light appeared. It was the eyes of Rosa, the mother dragon. She opened her eyes and looked at the boy. Beside her, Leo the father dragon lifted his head. Little Ember woke up and made a soft chirping sound. They had been resting, their bodies slowly healing from the food and care Oliver had given them. Oliver fell forward and wrapped his arms around Rosa's neck. He was sobbing now, all of his fear and confusion pouring out of him. He told them everything. He told them about the ships in the sky. He told them about the strange creatures with glowing eyes. He told them about his grandmother being taken. He told them that the world was ending and that he did not know what to do. Rosa did not move away. She let the boy hold her. Her great body was warm against his. Leo moved closer, and even little Ember came over and pressed against Oliver's side. The dragons could feel his pain. They could understand his fear. Then something incredible happened. Rosa's eyes began to glow brighter. The golden light grew and grew until it filled the entire cave. But it was not a painful light. It was warm and beautiful. Oliver felt the light touch his skin and he felt something change inside him. The fear did not go away completely, but it became smaller. It became manageable. The light spread from Rosa to Leo to Ember, and all three dragons began to shine. Leo opened his mouth and made a sound. It was not a roar like Oliver had imagined dragons would sound. It was something much deeper and stranger. It was a sound like the earth singing. It was a frequency that Oliver felt in his bones, in his chest, in his very soul. The ground beneath the cave began to shake gently. The water in the pool outside the cave rippled. The sound continued for a long time, filling the world with a power that was older than humans, older than cities, older than anything modern. When the sound stopped, Oliver felt something shift. It was like a door opening inside his mind. Suddenly, he could understand things he had not understood before. He could feel the dragon's thoughts. Not words exactly, but meanings, feelings, memories. Rosa spoke to him without using her mouth. Her thoughts appeared in his mind like thoughts of his own, but they were not his. They were hers. She showed him things. She showed him that dragons were real and alive thousands of years ago, before humans built cities and airports. She showed him that dragons possessed magic, real magic that was older than technology. She showed him that the dragons had been hiding for centuries, waiting for a world that had learned kindness again. She showed him that Oliver, by his simple act of helping them, had proven that kindness still existed in human hearts. Leo's thoughts came next. Leo was a warrior. His mind was filled with strategy and strength. He showed Oliver memories of ancient battles, of dragons fighting alongside humans against terrible enemies. He showed Oliver that he was not alone. He showed Oliver that together humans and dragons could accomplish impossible things. He showed Oliver that the barrier between the world of magic and the world of humans was about to break open, and Oliver could be the bridge. Little Ember's thoughts were different. They were younger and more curious. Ember showed Oliver happiness. Ember showed Oliver the joy of flying and breathing fire and playing in the sky. Ember showed Oliver that even in darkness, there was always light. Even when everything seemed hopeless, there was always hope. Oliver opened his eyes. He was still in the cave, still holding Rosa's neck. But he felt different. He felt older somehow, even though only minutes had passed. He felt stronger. He felt like he understood something important about the world that he had not understood before. Rosa lowered her head and looked directly into Oliver's eyes. When she spoke again, her words appeared in his mind with crystal clarity. She said, "You gave us food when you were hungry. You gave us medicine when you had no money. You gave us shelter when you had little yourself. You showed us that your kind still has the capacity for true kindness. For this gift we will give you ours. We will give you our strength. We will give you our magic. We will help you save your grandmother. We will help you save your world." Oliver nodded. He could not speak. His throat was tight with emotion. But he did not need to speak. The dragons could feel what was in his heart. Leo spread his good wing and stretched his body. Ember climbed onto his back, chirping with excitement. Rosa stood tall, and for the first time, Oliver saw her not as a weak and starving creature, but as what she truly was. A warrior. A protector. A queen. "We are ready," Rosa's thoughts came to Oliver. "And now you must be ready too. The time has come for humans and dragons to stand together once more. The time has come for the world to remember that magic is real." Oliver took a deep breath. He climbed onto Rosa's back, his small hands gripping the scales along her neck. He was still afraid. He was still worried about his grandmother. But he was no longer alone. He had allies. He had dragons. He had hope. From outside the cave, the sound of the alien machines grew closer. But Oliver was not running anymore. This time he was running toward something. He was running toward his destiny. He was running toward the moment when the world would change forever. Oliver gripped Rosa's neck as the mother dragon emerged from the cave. The waterfall splashed around them as they stepped into the open air. Behind them came Leo, moving carefully with his injured wing held close to his body. Little Ember flew above them, her young wings catching the afternoon light. The three dragons moved together, united and purposeful, toward the town where the aliens had taken control. As they approached the edge of the forest, Oliver could see the energy barriers clearly now. They surrounded the entire town like walls made of blue light. Inside the barriers he could see people being herded into groups. Alien soldiers, the Vex with their crystal-like bodies and glowing eyes, moved among the humans with mechanical precision. It was a terrible sight. It was a scene of defeat and despair. But then Oliver saw something that gave him hope. Near the cottage of Eleanor, a group of people had gathered. They were hiding behind the buildings, watching the aliens carefully. Oliver recognized some of them. There was Henry the baker from the town. There was Emma the librarian from the school. There was David, a young man who worked at the garage. And there were others, ordinary people who had not been captured yet. They were watching. They were waiting. They were looking for a way to fight back. Rosa stopped at the edge of the forest. Through the bond they shared, she asked Oliver what he wanted to do. Oliver closed his eyes and thought about his grandmother. He thought about all the people trapped behind those barriers. He thought about what needed to happen. Then he sent his answer to Rosa. Rosa turned to Leo and Ember, and Oliver felt a wave of communication pass between them. It was like watching a conversation happen in a language he did not know, but he understood the meaning. It was a plan. It was a strategy. It was a choice to stand and fight. Rosa took a step forward into the open. The moment her massive body came into view, alarms began to sound. The Vex soldiers noticed her immediately. They stopped what they were doing and turned their glowing eyes toward the dragon. At first they did not react. They did not seem to understand what they were seeing. Creatures of pure technology often had trouble recognizing magic. A Vex commander stepped forward. His body was slightly larger than the others and his glow was brighter. Oliver recognized the sign of authority. This was their leader. The commander raised one of his crystal-like arms, and energy weapons began to charge. Dozens of Vex soldiers aimed their weapons at Rosa. The commander fired first. A blast of pure energy shot toward the dragon, moving so fast that Oliver barely saw it coming. It was meant to burn through flesh and bone. It was meant to kill. But Rosa was ready. She raised one of her massive claws and drew a symbol in the air. The symbol glowed with golden light, an ancient mark of protection. When the energy blast hit the symbol, it did not explode. It did not tear through Rosa's body. Instead, it simply disappeared, absorbed into the magic like water disappearing into sand. The blast had no effect. The Vex commander seemed confused. He fired again. And again. And again. Each blast was absorbed by Rosa's magical shields. Each blast was rendered harmless by the ancient power that flowed through the dragon. Then Leo moved. Despite his broken wing, the father dragon rushed forward with surprising speed. He opened his mouth and released a sound, the same sound Oliver had heard in the cave. It was the sound of the earth singing. It was a frequency of pure power. When the sound hit the nearest Vex soldiers, they stumbled backward. Their weapons sparked and failed. The energy barriers around the town flickered and dimmed. Little Ember took to the air. She flew in circles above the town, and with each circle she released bursts of golden light. The light was not violent or destructive. It was like watching a child paint with light. But wherever the light touched, technology failed. Vex ships in the distance began to malfunction. Weapons stopped working. Communication devices went silent. Oliver heard shouting from the buildings where the humans were hiding. Henry the baker emerged first, holding a metal pipe from the hardware store. Emma came next, carrying a length of rope. David and the others followed, all of them armed with simple tools and desperate courage. They saw the dragons fighting. They saw that resistance was possible. They saw that they were not helpless. The Vex commander tried to organize a retreat, but Leo blocked the way. The father dragon's wings spread wide, even the broken one, and he stood between the aliens and their ships. His golden eyes met the commander's glowing eyes. There was a moment of understanding between them. The Vex were beings of pure logic. They could calculate odds. They could recognize when they were losing. The humans and dragons fought together. It was not a traditional battle. There were no explosions or massive destruction. Instead, it was a series of small victories. When a Vex soldier tried to capture Henry, Rosa appeared and blocked his path. When Emma and David were cornered, Leo's roar sent the aliens running. When Little Ember was threatened, Oliver jumped down from Rosa's back and stood in front of the small dragon, and his courage inspired the humans to stand with him. The energy barriers began to fail completely. As they flickered and died, the people trapped inside began to escape. They poured out from behind the barriers, seeing the dragons and the humans standing together, and they found hope. Oliver moved through the chaos, feeling the connection with Rosa guiding him. He could sense what the dragons needed. He could understand their strategies. He was no longer just a boy watching events happen. He was part of something greater. He was the bridge between the world of humans and the world of magic. The Vex commander realized the battle was lost. He signaled his soldiers to retreat. The remaining aliens ran toward their ships. The ships began to rise, their damaged engines struggling to function. Within minutes, the three massive vessels lifted into the sky. They moved away from the town, away from the dragons, away from the humans who had dared to resist. As the ships disappeared into the clouds, the town fell silent. The sound of alien machines was gone. The hum of the energy barriers had ceased. The terrible blue lights faded from the sky. Oliver stood in the middle of the town, his hand on Rosa's neck, and looked around at the impossible sight. Humans and dragons stood together. They had won. They had actually won. Against all odds, they had stood against an alien invasion and emerged victorious. Henry the baker was staring at the dragons with wonder in his eyes. Emma the librarian had tears running down her face. David and the others were slowly approaching, not with weapons, but with hands extended in peace and gratitude. And somewhere in the town, Eleanor was pushing through the crowd, searching for her grandson. When she saw Oliver standing there with his hand on a dragon's neck, when she saw him alive and whole and surrounded by people who looked at him with respect and amazement, she broke into a run. She ran to him and held him close, and Oliver held her back, and together they wept with joy and relief. The world had changed. And it had changed because a 10-year-old boy had shown kindness to creatures that everyone else had forgotten. The sun rose slowly over the town the morning after the battle. The sky was clear and beautiful, painted in shades of pink and gold. Birds sang in the trees. The world looked almost the same as it had before the invasion, but everything had changed. Nothing would ever be the same again. Oliver woke up in his grandmother's cottage. He had slept deeply, exhausted from the events of the previous day. Eleanor was in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of eggs and toast drifted through the house. Oliver could hear her moving around, humming a quiet song. It was a normal sound, a peaceful sound, and Oliver realized how much he had missed that normality. He got out of bed and went to the kitchen. Eleanor turned and pulled him into a tight embrace. She held him for a long time, not saying anything. She did not need to say anything. Her embrace said everything. It said how grateful she was. It said how proud she was. It said how much she loved him. After breakfast, Oliver went outside. The dragons were waiting for him in the forest clearing behind the cottage. Rosa stood tall and strong, her scales gleaming in the morning sunlight. Her body had healed completely from the food and care Oliver had given her. Leo's broken wing was still healing, but he moved with more confidence. Little Ember played in the clearing, chasing butterflies and laughing, a sound like wind chimes. Oliver spent the entire day with the dragons. They did not speak in words, but the bond between them remained strong. Through their connection, Oliver understood that the dragons were preparing to leave. They had been hidden from the world for centuries, but now that the world knew they existed, everything had changed. They could not hide anymore. They had to choose what to do with the knowledge that humans had discovered them. Rosa showed Oliver something beautiful. She showed him a vision of dragons living openly in the world again. She showed him cities where dragons soared through the sky alongside airplanes. She showed him humans and dragons working together to build something better than what had existed before. She showed him a future where the two worlds were no longer separate. That afternoon, representatives from the government arrived in the town. They came in cars and helicopters. They were serious-looking men and women in suits, carrying papers and devices. They came to investigate what had happened. They wanted to understand how a small town had defeated an alien invasion. Oliver met with them in Eleanor's cottage. He sat at the kitchen table, still covered in dirt from playing with the dragons, and he told them everything. He told them about finding the dragons in the forest. He told them about spending his savings to help them. He told them about the connection between humans and dragons. He told them about the magic that had stopped the Vex invasion. At first, the government representatives did not believe him. They thought it was a story. They thought Oliver was confused or making things up. But then Oliver took them to the forest. He brought them to the clearing where the dragons were waiting. When they saw Rosa, Leo, and Ember with their own eyes, when they felt the ancient power radiating from the dragons, they understood that Oliver was telling the truth. The officials asked many questions. They asked about the dragons' abilities. They asked where the dragons had come from. They asked what the dragons wanted. Oliver answered as best he could, translating between the human language and the thoughts that came from the dragons. Rosa spoke to Oliver, and Oliver translated her words to the government officials. Rosa said that the dragons did not wish to be captured or studied. The dragons did not wish to be treated as weapons or tools. The dragons only wished to be recognized as intelligent beings who deserved respect and freedom. They wished to help humanity, but only if humanity was willing to change. Only if humanity was willing to share the world with creatures of magic. Only if humanity was willing to remember that not everything could be understood through technology and science. The government officials discussed among themselves. They made phone calls to higher authorities. They sent reports to important people in distant cities. What had started as a small invasion in a small town had become a matter of international importance. The world needed to know that dragons were real. The world needed to know that magic existed. Over the next few weeks, things changed quickly. News of the dragons spread around the entire world. Scientists wanted to study them. Governments wanted to make treaties with them. People came from distant places to see the dragons with their own eyes. Some people were afraid. Some people were excited. Some people did not believe it was real until they saw the dragons themselves. But through all of the chaos and attention, Oliver remained calm. He was the bridge between the human world and the world of dragons. He helped translate. He helped explain. He helped people understand that the dragons were not monsters or threats. They were allies. They were teachers. They were proof that the world was larger and more wonderful than humans had ever imagined. Eleanor watched her grandson become someone important and respected. People called him a hero. Adults listened to what he said. Young people wanted to know his story. But Eleanor knew that Oliver had not changed. He was still the same kind boy who had spent his last dollar on hungry dragons. That kindness was his true strength. 3 months after the invasion, a special ceremony was held in the town. Humans and dragons gathered together in the clearing behind Eleanor's cottage. Government officials, scientists, teachers, and ordinary people from the town stood side by side with Rosa, Leo, and Ember. It was a moment of peace. It was a moment of unity. Oliver stood between Rosa and Eleanor, holding the hand of his grandmother and the claw of the dragon. The officials announced that a new agreement had been made. Dragons would be protected by law. Humans and dragons would work together to build a better future. Technology and magic would blend to create something new and wonderful. As the sun set that evening, Oliver looked at the faces around him. He saw wonder. He saw hope. He saw the beginning of something beautiful. He thought about how it had all started with one simple act of kindness. One boy. One family of hungry dragons. One choice to help instead of walk away. Eleanor put her arm around Oliver and whispered, "I am so proud of you, my dear boy. You have changed the world. Oliver looked up at Rosa and he felt her thoughts in his mind. She was showing him the future. She was showing him years to come where humans and dragons lived together in peace. She was showing him a world where magic and technology worked side by side. She was showing him that his kindness had created something that would last forever. Oliver smiled. He was only 10 years old, but he had learned something that many adults never learned. He had learned that kindness is not weakness. Kindness is strength. True strength is the power to see worth in others and to help them without asking for anything in return. True strength is the courage to be different, to stand alone if necessary, and to believe in goodness even when the world seems dark. As night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, Oliver stood with his grandmother and his dragons, looking up at the infinite possibilities of a new dawn. The world had changed. And it had changed because one boy remembered how to be kind.